Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the 1-0 podcast. I'm Joel Haas.
And I'm Avery Hill.
Today, we'll be previewing Penn State's upcoming matchup against Ohio State. We'll also have former Penn State offensive lineman Golden Israel Achumba on the pod to give his perspective on the matchup. But to start it off, Avery, obviously we have a big one coming to Beaver Stadium on Saturday. What are your expectations for this matchup?
I think, first of all, I think it'll be a war. I mean, if you look at the two teams, this is, first of all, Penn State's biggest game of the year, by far, not a question. We talked about before last week about how, every week they're like, oh, this is the biggest game. This is the biggest game. When you look back in 20 years, this will still be the biggest game. We know that. So I think it'll be a battle. I do think that the one thing that I'm looking forward to seeing is that Penn State run defense against that Ohio State offense. You look at Judkins and Travion Henderson. Obviously, Henderson didn't get to play last year, but obviously played the years before, did well. Judkins played Penn State when he was at Ole Miss, and he did, 100 yards. And he's obviously a really good back, all-around back, can do a lot of things. He's fast. I think that's something to see how Penn State's defense stacks up with that. I mean, they've checked every box so far. They've answered every question. So I think the next thing they have to solve is, okay, are we up there with the elite run defenses? They're good, but are they elite yet?
Yeah, Ohio State's roster, just top to bottom, is absolutely ridiculous.
When you spend $40 million or whatever they spent, I mean, I'd hope so.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, they spent a ridiculous amount of money on NIL, not only on, retaining the guys and bringing in recruits, but what they did in the transfer portal. You mentioned, bringing in Judkins from Ole Miss. They went and got Caleb Downs from Alabama. They brought in a ton of guys, and then, you look at the freshman wide receiver, Jeremiah Smith, who's absolutely ridiculous. I found out he was a cousin of Geno Smith, which I thought was kind of cool. I found that out this morning.
Isn't he a cousin of, Serena Williams, too? Oh, no, that's Ryan Williams. Wrong person. Yeah, what's up with that, though? Ryan Williams, Serena Williams, and him, Geno Smith, I guess it runs in the family. I guess. Even looking at, Caleb Downs, I just found out his brother, I think, is Josh Downs, the receiver for the Colts. So,
okay.
But obviously he's kind of the better one. I don't know how Josh Downs came out of high school, but I promise you that Caleb Downs will have a better NFL career. So yeah, it's really interesting to see that family tree and stuff like that coming back. And I kind of just feel old sometimes hearing things like that.
Yeah. If you're trying to pinpoint a weakness on this Ohio State offense, some people are going to look at quarterback, but I think Will Howard is, I think he's one of the best quarterbacks in college football. Yeah. He might not be top 5, but he's certainly up there.
Yeah.
I think he does a really good job, and it was an intriguing move to me when they brought him in, had him transfer in from Kansas State, because you kind of look at his tape, and there were some impressive plays at Kansas State, and he was a big runner, put up some big numbers on the ground. They haven't used him as much in the run game at Ohio State, but the thing at Kansas State that was always the knack on him was he had some really head-scratching plays where it's just some really bad throws, some what are you doing moments.
A Jameis Winston, Carson Wentz type of thing.
Yeah,
if we're talking,
he's got a little Jameis in him. Yeah. And it's you were kind of questioning, if he does that at Ohio State, he's in trouble, you know what I mean? And and I think we kind of saw it against Oregon with that run at the end of the
game.
The
slide.
Right, and that's, obviously Ohio State's
Dak Prescott,
only loss of the season, but...
Yeah.
But again, you look at his overall body of work from that game. I think he had over 300 yards passing, a few touchdowns, things like that. So, I still think, and that's, again, a great Oregon defense. And so you look at this Ohio State roster, I don't really know if you can pinpoint really any area of weakness across, any side of the ball. You could talk about the offensive line. They're now on their third string left tackle, which I think is an area of weakness that potentially Penn State could exploit.
Yeah.
Which just kind of unfortunate for them that, they've had 2 guys go down at a key position like that. And obviously if you're Penn State, you like what you have at defensive end right now. You're not sure if Denai Dennis Sutton is going to go because we didn't see him at practice. But, even Abdul Carter or, whoever it may be, Smith Vilbert, me and Vanover, they've got a bunch of guys in that room who, even the freshman Max Granville might get some run toward the end of the, later in the game in relief. And so obviously you want to apply some pressure there. I think that's why Nebraska was successful last week.
Yeah.
That was a close game. I don't know how much of that you got to watch, but did you have any takeaways from that matchup?
I think one of the biggest takeaways is that even though Ohio State did all of this in the portal, they are a beatable team. I think if you look at, I guess, the past 7 years, because what they haven't been beat, or Penn State hasn't beaten Ohio State in 7 years. If you look at that, I think this year and last year were probably the worst Ohio State teams and still worse, like they're, college football playoff.
Still like top 5
still,
team in the
it's
country,
just the other teams are just ridiculous. Like,
yeah.
And it's talent-wise, this might be one of the best, but I think one thing is sometimes they start slow. They, kind of slip a little bit, they'll throw a pick here and there, and they're like, oh, it's Ohio State, they'll recover. And that's something Ohio State's done for years. You saw it, 2 years ago at Penn State. They started out slow, and then second half they said, oh, yeah, we're playing football now. So, like, I think one thing it showed me is that they're just beatable. I mean, I think that they have the talent, but, of course, as you address, I mean, there's offensive line issues with, injuries and stuff like that. I mean, there's things going on in the program. I think the thing about Will Howard, like talking about Will Howard, I think he's a good quarterback, but I think the thing about him is he's at Ohio State. So being a good quarterback doesn't work. I mean, look at it. I mean, I wouldn't call Kyle McCord a good quarterback, but still, even looking at Kyle McCord, like, I don't think he was terrible last year. I just think that there's so much talent around him that if he's not putting up, let's say, like 4,000 yards, 40 touchdowns, oh, he's not good. Or, something like that in the college equivalent. Like, just because he's not doing that, it's like, oh, yeah, he's kind of like the liability on the team. But I think Will Howard's case just comes from the fact that the team is talented. That's a talented team. I think he still has a lively arm. I think he's going to get that ball down the field. I think he'll, hit Jeremiah Smith and Emeka down the field, taking shots all day. So I think it'll be very interesting to see how he stacks up looking at the Ohio State perspective.
Yeah, it's just kind of next man up in that wide receiver room. We obviously know what they've been able to produce in the last few years. It's every year they bring in at least one 5-star, and then they send another guy to the first round of the NFL, and then someone just steps in, and the cycle continues. Obviously, another loaded room this year. But I think the tricky thing, like if you're Penn State or if you're a Penn State fan and you're looking at what Ohio State did against Nebraska, you just can't expect Ohio State to play like that this weekend. Like, Ohio State, as much as it sucks for Penn State, Ohio State will always bring its A game against Penn State. Like, looking at recent history, Ohio State always plays well against Penn State.
Yeah.
Like, they don't beat themselves up. They don't make mistakes. Like, they're not going to throw multiple interceptions. They're not going to have 10 penalties. They're not going to come out and start slow or whatever it may be. Like, they're going to bring their A game for this matchup. And if you're Penn State and you're just going off of last week's game and you're thinking, oh, that's what Ohio State's going to play like this week. No. Like, it's going to be a completely different beast. Going to be a completely different thing. They were probably, holding some things back against Nebraska in anticipation of this matchup and things like that. And, Penn State, you could argue, was hiding some things from Ohio State as well leading up to this matchup. So it'll be interesting to see what, Kotelnicki and the offense are able to scheme up. But I guess we'll just have to kind of wait and see on Saturday.
Yeah, and I think another thing that just stands out to me is just the timing of Penn State's injuries in relation to Ohio State. Like, of course, you looked last week, Donko went down, Denai Dennis Sutton, as we talked about, went down, and then, of course, Drew Aller went down. Obviously, Aller was at practice. He looked fine to me. Obviously, I'm no medical expert. I don't know what's going on. We only saw him for about 10 or 15 minutes, so we don't really know what's going on. But I think the one that's interesting to me is Anthony Donko. I mean, Donko went down earlier in the season, then, of course, went down last week and didn't come back after the second half. So I think that's very interesting, and it reminds me of 2 years ago. If you look at it, was Olu, who was injured at left tackle, obviously, and then they played Ohio State at Penn State, and it was JT Tuimoloau who had two sacks,
craziest stat line you'll ever see.
A pick six. Was it 2 picks?
I think it was 2 picks.
Yeah, so one
six.
pick, and then the other one was a pick six, a forced fumble, like the craziest stat line I've ever seen in my life. Like, I was at the game watching, and like every single play, I'm like, who was that? 44, 44, 44. I'm like, so I think the timing is the one thing that's very interesting to me. I think it would be interesting to see if he can go. I mean, I know Rucci played, but I think obviously Donko is the better tackle. I mean, there's a reason he's starting. I think his big body in general, he's a big guy. Like, I think he's going to be a much better, I guess, matchup for number 44. So I think that's a very interesting thing for me leading up to next week or leading up to Saturday.
Yeah, and Franklin obviously got asked about it because that's a huge story on the line, and for all those guys kind of just said, it'll be a game-time decision, so we don't really know anything there. If I had to guess, just based on what we saw during the practice availability, it looks like Drew's fine. Yeah. That's kind of the big question mark going into the game. Obviously, we don't want to say that and have it not be true, but based on what we saw And based on, we know it's a leg injury, some type of, I think, lower leg injury. I've heard both knee and ankle, so I'm not really sure exactly what it is. And obviously Penn State's doing us no favors. They're not going to give us any information about that. But from what we saw during practice, we saw him jogging between drills. He looked like he was moving fine. We saw him, dropping back to pass, a little 3-step, 5-step drop. Looked fine. I didn't think, he was moving gingerly or anything like that. I thought he was, putting full weight on the leg. And those videos are all up on my Twitter. I put a bunch of them up of him throwing. If anyone wants to, check it out, see for yourself. You can be the judge.
Good promo.
Right. No, but I mean, yeah, I thought he looked fine. I would anticipate Drew starting, but obviously, I would think Bo comes in at least at certain times, certain packages throughout the game to kind of add that extra element against Ohio State. But on the other side, quarterback Will Howard for Ohio State wanted to bring up his bulletin board material, if you want to call it that. He had some interesting comments about not being recruited by Penn State out of high school. Said that we were going to find out on Saturday if he was actually good enough to deserve an offer from Penn State, which is the team that he grew up rooting for. I just want to say he did not have an offer from Ohio State coming out of high school. I think he only had
a lot of schools, but
I think his only offers.
He was like a 3-star,
right?
So
he was like a 3-star, and I think his only Power 5 offers were from Kansas State. I think there might have been one other, but not big name schools. And so obviously, he was kind of under the radar, not just, among universities and programs, but also the recruiting services. Obviously, we're kind of lowering him. And you also have to realize that this is his 5th year of college football. And if you look at what he did freshman, sophomore, junior year, he wasn't that great. He wasn't on a lot of people's radars. And so he was kind of a guy who maybe a late bloomer, developed a little bit over time as his college career has progressed. And so in hindsight, I don't think you can blame Penn State for not offering him, but obviously he seems to be using it as motivation. I mean, what's your read on that?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, kind of as a player, of course you're going to use that as motivation, but if we take that out of it, I'm not the player, obviously. Like, looking at it, there's really nothing there in terms of, why didn't they recruit me? I mean, obviously, Drew Shelton was his high school teammate. Like, we know that Penn State watched, he went to Downington East, which I don't remember how far it is, but, kind of around the Central PA area. I know they played a couple games with State High and stuff like that. But, like, they've seen, obviously, them ball. I mean, he's the left tackle. He's the, I don't know, what position he ended up playing in high school, but obviously he was one of Will Howard's protectors. So I think, obviously, if they watched him and they said, okay, we don't think he's that good, or we don't think he's for our program, then that's just kind of what it is. Like, I think that it's not really too much of a big deal. Why didn't they recruit me? Well, again, not a lot of schools recruited you. So, but I mean, I do think it is a good story for him to come back having, had his late bloom and, succeeded at Kansas State that final year, came to Ohio State and being able to be in his home state and be able to kind of showcase like really what Penn State was missing out on. I mean, that's a good opportunity for him. So.
Yeah, that's a great storyline for the Ohio State beat writers there if the Buckeyes are able to win this.
Oh, yeah, they got tons of stories.
That whole redemption arc.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, what do you think, kind of looking big picture here, obviously we've all heard the statistics about James Franklin's struggles against Ohio State, his struggles against top 5, top 10, ranked teams, whatever statistic you want to pull up. Everyone loves to bring those up. I had people, and I think that's a big national perspective as well, because I was, as I was tweeting throughout this week, kind of leading up to the game, just we got Franklin for media on Monday and Wednesday, and I'm tweeting, quotes from Franklin about, players or whatever it may be, and I have people in my comment section from, BYU, Arkansas, LSU saying Franklin can't win big games. It's like, all right, well, first of all, why are you here? But
I think that's just all they know, honestly.
Right. No, I think the national perception of Franklin right now is just based on one thing, and that's his record, in these big games, and obviously 1-9 against Ohio State isn't great, but you have to look at how good Ohio State's been over the last decade.
Yeah.
I mean, every time Penn State plays Ohio State's a top 5 team, so people always want to bring up, Franklin's 1-9 against Ohio State, he's 1-8 against top 5 teams. Well, how many of those, top 5 teams were Ohio State? Like it was like I don't think Franklin has an Ohio State problem. I think you just can't beat top 5 teams, but find me one coach that can consistently beat top 5 teams, you know what I mean? Or someone who realistically Penn State could go higher. Like, I don't understand that argument, but obviously from an optics perspective, people aren't going to take all the context into consideration. They're going to look at it and say Franklin bad against good teams. And, going into this game, obviously a win for Penn State would have a big impact on that perception and what people think of the program. So, I mean, how impactful do you think this game is, just in terms of how Penn State's perceived at a national level, and in terms of the playoff race and things like that?
I mean, first, for the playoff race, obviously it's huge. You have this win, you basically solidify, your resume to go to the college football playoffs, probably as one of the top seeds. Obviously, winning the Big Ten is what matters now. So, we'll see for that part. But obviously, they'll be making the college football playoffs, given they don't, just fall on their face, lose to Purdue, lose to Maryland, which I can just say right here is not happening. So, I think that'll be a big thing for the playoff race. But I think looking further to Franklin, I do think that it still is probably his biggest game in a long time. I don't know about ever, but I think it's definitely one of his biggest games in a long time. I think if you look at the previous, 3-4 years, they've had their schedule kind of set out to where it's like, okay, they know they're going to beat, everyone but Ohio State and Michigan for the most part. Obviously, you had the Iowa game, stuff like that, a couple of anomalies. But in general, it's just been like, okay, we're going to win all these, scratch these out. You got to win these 2 games, and I think that's where the spotlight comes from, which to some point is fair, but at some point I can see it coming from the perspective that people think that Penn State should be this, national champion immediately. Like, obviously he had to rebuild that program after, the whole scandal and everything, so he had to kind of come work from the bottom and work up, and I think he's done a good job, and I think that he's up there with the top coaches, but I think the problem is people want to put him in that, let's say, top 5 or 10, whatever you want to say, conversation, but they'll look at the resume and they're like, okay, he's not winning these big games. But I think this year, if he does it this year, I think that'll kind of erase all these questions, because it won't erase them because people are always going to say it, but I think it's going to definitely show that he's just been building the program up and up. And I know, it was a couple of years ago he said, okay, we're here, like, we're ready to compete, we're ready to do this, we're ready to do that. I think this game is the prove it game. You don't have to worry about Michigan this year. You win this game, you can likely get out of the season with 1 loss and go to the college football playoffs. So,
yeah, I think he's just been put in a difficult situation, because you look at, the measuring stick over the last, basically Franklin's entire tenure has been measured by where do you stack up against Ohio State, and I don't know if that's necessarily a fair comparison, because you look at the 2 programs and, you could argue they're both blue bloods. Penn State's kind of on that border of blue blood status, maybe like a baby blue.
Yeah,
they're kind of halfway there. But regardless, you kind of look at them, and when you really dig into it, we mentioned it earlier with the NIL. I think the NCAA actually on their website has like an estimation of what teams are spending, and Ohio State's second in the country behind Texas at $20 million. I was just looking at it today. Yeah. And Ohio State's spending about $20 million this year on NIL. Penn State's at $13
Can I hold $1 million? Like, what? This is ridiculous.
It's insane numbers. Yeah. And then, Penn State $13 million, which I think is still like top 15, top 20 range.
It's good.
It's good, but like
Ohio State just overspends.
Right. Ohio State, in terms of resources, and it's not just NIL, in terms of, just program funding, Ohio State has better facilities, more modern,
longer runway.
Bigger, longer airport runway over there in Ohio. And there's just so many things. And even just historically, Ohio State, a lot more national championships, more wins, higher winning percentage, more bowl games, whatever you want to look at. Like, Ohio State just, like, historically is the better program than Penn State. Like, they're going to beat Penn State more often than not, kind of based on the resources available and things like that. And so I think, trying to compare and say, James Franklin can't beat Ohio State, well, he's not given an even playing field. And obviously you would want him to win. You're not expecting him to win every time they play. You probably want him to win more than 10% of his games against Ohio State, but it is a big challenge. But to your point about, kind of the remainder of Penn State's schedule and things like that, like, this is the game. Like, you're not looking at Purdue, you're not worried. You're not looking at Maryland and getting scared. You're not looking at Washington and shaking, you know what I mean? No. You're Minnesota, whatever. Like, and
they can do something, but that's not something you circle when you begin the season. There's one team that you circle. You might get a little. You're not going to grab a Sharpie, but you might grab a little pencil or something like that, a lead pencil, if that, to circle USC and maybe circle Wisconsin, seeing where they were if you're looking, before the season. But Ohio State was the one that you're Sharpie. Like, I'm. Right. Like, getting this whole thing, like, we gotta make sure we're ready for Ohio State. So
yeah, none of the other schools really, especially at this point in the season, because maybe before the season you could say, well, USC could be tough or whatever, but you've passed that test, right? And you look at the remaining 5 games. There's one team to beat, and Purdue, maybe you can clip this if you want, use it as bulletin board material. Maybe you only lose by 49 instead of 56 because of this video, but
it's out of 67, but yeah,
yeah, if you're Penn State, this is the game. This is what you look at every year is when do we play Ohio State? Can we beat them? And I think one of the differences this year is Penn State's the higher ranked team coming in at number 3, Ohio State's number 4. Typically, it's the other way around where Penn State's a little bit behind Ohio State. I think this is only the second time under Franklin where Penn State's been higher. I believe the other was 2017 where they lost by 1 point.
Yeah.
Obviously a heartbreaking loss, and they've been close in the past and things like that. But I just think if you're Penn State, like, the time is now. Like, if you have anything in your bag, if you have any tricks, any special thing, just any extra ounce of motivation that you can pour into this game, like, you have to give this game everything you've got.
Sure.
Like, there's no holding back. This is, you know what I mean?
It's a legacy game. That's exactly what it is. Like, from all across the board, like, it's a James Franklin legacy game. Abdul Carter, he's going to the draft after this, most likely. Legacy game. Nick Singleton, he could get into the draft. Legacy game. Like this, and of course Aller, like legacy game. Like this is a legacy game for Penn State. I mean, even looking at Devon J. Thomas, he's 0-5 against Ohio State, so he's trying not to go 0-6.
Right. Nobody on this roster, nobody on Penn State's current roster has beaten Ohio State. Like, none of them were around the last time Penn State won. So this means a lot. And like you mentioned, there's a ton of veterans on the team. A lot of these guys are probably going to be heading off to the NFL after this season, whether they're junior, senior, super duper senior, whatever. A lot of these guys are leaving. Penn State will look a lot different last year, and they've recruited well. So, I'm not too worried about a drop-off. But just looking at the course of these guys' careers, if there's kind of one thing that they wanted to do, besides make the playoff, but one of the things that they haven't been able to do is beat Ohio State. These guys, most of them have beaten Michigan, a couple years ago, and so they still kind of have that fresh in their minds. But none of these guys have beaten Ohio State, and that's just a big thing that I think a lot of these guys want to take care of. But I mean, I just think if you're Penn State, like, this is your opportunity to make a statement. I mean, we'll be in the press box on Saturday, and I guarantee you there's going to be, tons of scouts from NFL teams across the country. Everyone is going to be, watching this game. All eyes.
Gotta get that seat in the media room because it's going to get packed.
We're going to have to hurry up to Franklin's post-game presser if we want to get a seat. And, you've got ESPN College Game Day. You've got Fox Big Noon. You've got Josh
which no one's going to watch, but
Right. No, that'll be funny because
they might get the leftovers, like people that just couldn't fit into the space and everything. Like they just kind of off to the side with a sign up that's clearly for College Game Day, But
I don't know if you saw, but they're both setting up at
I parked right over there, so I'm looking. I'm like, and then you look over, you're like, okay. I want to know who's going to do the kick. I mean, I have a candidate myself. I mean. Pat, if you're watching, Lau Allenstein, he has a leg. A leg.
We want to see him do the kick of destiny.
Just reach out to me. Reach out to me on Twitter, official Ave, and we'll get you set up with Lau. You will not regret it.
There you go. Everyone will be there, and I think it's funny that they're at gates that are right next. I forget which gate. I think like game day is at gate A, and then
I think it's
at like
B and C or something like that?
Yeah,
they're like because C is the backside one,
They're literally
right beside each other. So you're just going to hear all the College Game Day noise. Yeah, we're live and packed at Fox's Big Noon Kickoff. No.
You can see everyone in the background of the camera shot.
Probably paying people to get into the shot and everything.
If you're a Penn State fan and you're going to this game and you hate Big Noon, which I think is 99% of Penn State fans, if you hate Big Noon, you know what to do. Like, pack College Game Day.
Yeah.
Kind of let them know. Obviously there's a preference here to which pregame show that people prefer, and obviously the time slot and everything that comes with it. But the original point is, all of this attention is focused on you. Like,
it's a lot of attention.
Yeah, this is like your moment to cement yourself as an elite team, which you haven't been able to do in a long time. Like, this is the game for Penn State, and so I think they just have to treat it as such and play their best game.
Yeah, and I think they are. I mean, I think talking to them at media and seeing how they were in practice, like, practice was chill, but at the same time it looked like they were ultra focused, trying to make sure things were right, like very accountable. And like I was watching the linebackers, and I know Kobe was going, I don't know if he false started or anything, but obviously he made a mistake, and his teammates came behind and checked him immediately. They're like let's go, like let's wake up, like let's go. And like even Kobe talked about it, like he's like, I'm feeling it's a little different this week. Like they're obviously going to try to approach the game the same, but they understand the magnitude of the game. We asked Trey Wallace just about playing Ohio State, and his face lit up immediately. He didn't have to say anything. His answer was there. Like, everyone wants to do it. Jalen Reed said, I want to make a statement. Like, everybody wants to do it. It's a big game. The hype is there. I mean, even looking at College Game Day being, I think this is the first time in, 3 or so years? I think Auburn was the last time they did it. Mm-hmm. There's a reason they did it, and obviously it's because I guess the program wasn't at a point where they're like, okay, it's worth the game. Obviously, this is how the highest Penn State's been off the top of my head since then. So, obviously, there's warrant behind that. So, yeah, I think that they feel it, and I think hopefully that turns into just an absolute war between both teams on Saturday.
Yeah, I think it's funny because you look at James Franklin, and he'll do the same thing every week where he says, 1-0, 1-0, 1-0, 1-0, Ohio State, or Bowling Green.
Every game's a big game.
Every game's a big game.
Lose the Bowling Green if you want.
Yeah, it's he says we're going to stick to our process. We're going to do the same thing that we always do. Nothing changes, and we try to ask him these questions about how are you preparing differently for Ohio State, and he goes, we're not. It's the same as any other opponent. We treat everyone with. Don't give me that, dude. Like, don't give me that. This is a big game.
Yeah,
this is a huge game. Everyone knows it. Like, whether or not Franklin's willing to admit it, you talked about it. Like, we got to talk to the players. They give you a little bit more there, in terms of just how different this game is. Like, this game's going to be different. Like, this is the one that you've, ever since the schedule was released, you're looking forward to. And I think, if you're Penn State, you need to play your best game and make a statement because in terms of a national audience, I mean, this is Penn State's only top, 15, 20 team. I mean, depending on where Illinois finishes the season. But this is the biggest game for Penn State, obviously. And, people on a national level, if they're going to tune in for a Penn State game this season, it's going to be this one, right? Like, this is the game that people are watching. And if you come out and, you poop the bed, your national perception goes down the drain.
And I think that's part of why James Franklin gets all of the negative, backlash that he gets because they don't watch every game. They're going to watch the games that matter. So for me, from a fan's perspective, let's take Penn State out of this. Say I'm watching Alabama, whatever. Watching Alabama. If every game that I watch from Alabama is when they play a ranked team, and every time I watch, they don't show up, why am I watching? I'm not watching that. Like, it's just like trying to watch LSU in week 1. Don't do it. Bad idea. They're not going to win unless you want to laugh at Brian Kelly and everything. Cool. But other than that, like, there's no reason to do so. So I think, like, the reason, like, with Franklin saying that, I mean, I get it from his perspective, but coach's perspective, you don't want to make it seem like, things are different, like, we want to do everything the same. But, obviously, I would assume he understands that players aren't going to do that. And I think as a player, trying to get to the NFL draft, things like that, we want to know that you're like, I take this serious. This is a big game. Like, we're not saying that you're not taking the other games serious. We're not saying that you're not giving 100% effort. It's just that when it comes to Ohio State, or the big games, there's another, switch that you can flip and, you can take over games and things like that. So I think, they're showing their passion. They're excited. I know that locker room pregame is probably going to be dead silent at somebody. Everybody's just going to be locked in, like, just sitting there, like, literally. Like, I would assume, like, is you either have the ones that are, like, really, really hyped or the ones that are chill. But, they'll have their moments they're hyped, but I think they'll be locked in. Like, they know it's a big game, and when they get out there, obviously we'll see what product they put on the field. And now joining us, we have Golden Israel Chumba. He played for Penn State for 4 years. Golden, looking ahead to the Ohio State matchup, can you just talk about kind of how you guys prepared for Ohio State year after year?
Yeah, for sure. O State was definitely a huge week. It was we didn't like to call it the week, but usually that week had the most preparation in terms of the ones before it. Everyone's locked in from the head coach to the nutritionist. No one's missing a beat. Whatever you would usually mess up on, it's got to be jam packed this week. Being that there wasn't a 12 team college football playoff, it meant more. Not that this week won't, but a lot more was on the line. So like everyone was definitely locked in. I want to say we had the same rigorous preparation. It's just that we turned it up a notch, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And just going into this week, like for you personally, are you kind of feeling, I guess, all the buzz is coming, like I guess around campus, have college game day, big noon kickoff, like?
Yeah, I've never heard of it or seen really college You said what's the name again?
So College Game Day.
College Game Day and
Big Noon Kickoff.
Yeah, at the same campus.
Yeah, the same.
Has that ever happened before?
I don't even know. Like that's what I was thinking of. I don't. Do you
Not
know?
at Penn State.
Yeah, definitely not at Penn State.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. They're like back and back, right? So, like hugging the BJC. Yeah, everyone's definitely riled up about it. Like in my classes now, like I got one of my former teammates, Gabe Mosu, the kicker, 99.
Yeah.
We sit together in class. We're both in the same what's it called graduate program, and like people were hassling him, telling him like, "Yo, no pressure," but like, "Yo, like we got to do this. Come on," all that stuff. I definitely hear and see the buzz. The media is definitely cooked this one up 3 versus 4, I think.
Yeah, 3 versus 4.
So like it's gonna be a huge game for anybody, for either team. So definitely hearing it and seeing it.
And just going into the game itself, I mean, I think one of the biggest, I guess, players that stand out, especially looking at the defense, is JT, number 44. I mean, obviously you guys have game planned against him in previous years. I mean, what do you remember just seeing him, I guess, on tape and things like that?
He capitalizes. Whatever you give him, he'll take. You know what I'm saying? I think the last game that he played here at Beaver Stadium, he got like an interception, a sack that caused a forced fumble, and something else that
another
that
pick
resulted in a turnover. Yeah. So we know that whatever you give him, he will take. He can also create too. So you know what I'm saying. He's someone to be respected and watched and looked out for on the field. I think they have the guys to stop him 1-on-1. I think that they had Olu matched up with him last year, right?
Yeah.
That was a good matchup. Didn't disrupt much. This year, I trust in the guys' abilities to be able to. I mean, like they're on scholarship too, so I trust that matchup.
And is there like a key for you, I guess, watching that defense at all? Anybody, like, I don't know how much you've watched of Ohio State, but any key like Penn State's got to stop this guy, or
Just on the defense, you're saying?
Yeah, or on offense as well, if you've kind of.
Okay, yeah. So we 44's been a problem since he was a freshman.
Yeah.
So obviously you gotta look out and respect his game. I know the D tackle's good too. I think number 91.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken. He came back. He's solid run defender and pass rusher. Ohio State's always really great with their fundamentals of rushing a passer. Because of their D line coach is very. I think I think you could say he's a legend. Larry Johnson. He has a great resume in terms of production.
Yeah.
They got a good DB, or I think 2 good DBs, Denzel Burke. You know what I'm saying? Like they're solid with their fundamentals too. And then on the other side of the ball, that's what I'm saying. This you see all the their spending come to fruition with the roster that they got on offense. They got 2 great running backs. You know what I'm saying? Both of them could be a starter on any team probably, and they're on the same team. You had the guy who could have went first round last year but stayed in the Mecca, and then partnered him with a true freshman that's going crazy. Vet tight end. I think he's been there. This might be his 5th or 4th year.
Yeah, he's been there for a while.
You got a stud on the offensive line. I forget it. Donovan. Is he playing this game? I don't know.
Not sure.
Well, we definitely. It's hard to say what you have to watch out for because there's not really an aspect of the game where they're bad at. They have great running backs, great receivers. The defense is traditional Ohio State defense. So I don't think there's one thing you can watch out for, and I'm not sure if there's one thing you can exploit. You just have to play a better game.
And just a little off topic, but as a, now obviously you're in your master's program, I was correct? Okay, so just being in your master's program, is it kind of, will you be at the game first of all on Saturday? Probably just watching.
I didn't get any tickets, so
okay,
I won't be there.
They don't give you no free little free former players, nothing.
I haven't really looked into the Letterman deal or how they do that stuff, but I don't think I won't be there. I'll probably be at the tailgates, but I don't know if I'll be there at the game. But I definitely even if you wanted to miss that game, you're not going to miss it. It's going to be on every television. So I'll definitely see it. Okay. And just going off of that, I think we would just want to go into our predictions. Do you want to start first? What I predict?
Yeah. You can go score, anything you like,
So it's hard for me. It's hard for me to like predict the score because I haven't seen what Penn State has done this year behind the scenes. Like, we've all obviously seen their games, but there's more. There's way more to it. There's more to me. Like the scores. The scores will tell us who won the game, but they don't tell us how.
Yeah.
They don't tell. You know what I'm saying? Like we just won the Wisconsin game, right? Great game by them. Only looking at the box score, you wouldn't be able to tell that we had a change in the QB position. You know what I'm saying? Two very different players, two very different play styles. And then I think we don't know yet who's starting or if he's good to go yet. So it's hard for me to say, but I know it'll be one of the traditional. I feel like this one will be tight. I feel like it'll definitely be tight. I don't think either team will be shorter, like stopped short of 3 scores.
Yeah.
I don't think either team will have less than 14 points on the board. And then as far as the winner, I trust in the Penn State football team that they can get it done. I know they can get it done, but it's any given Saturday, so I'm not sure.
Yeah. And Joel, do you want to give your predictions?
Yeah, so I actually went with Ohio State winning this one. I had the final score as 31-24. I do agree with you. I think it'll be very close. One-score game. I think it'll be kind of back and forth all the way through. And just like you mentioned, I think both offenses will find a good amount of success scoring, multiple times, things like that.
Yeah, and I think going off of that, I do agree. I think Ohio State takes it 24-21, but I think, again, it'll be an absolute war. There are, big players on both sides. I mean, looking at Tyler Warren, I think he'll have a big game. I know Caleb Downs and Emeka talked a lot about trying to stop him, him going in motion, him doing this and doing that, playing. Yeah, they talked about him in media like they were, in a good way, not anything like, they were just like, yeah, he's a really good player, like, he can get open, like he can make plays, like so. I think it'll be very interesting to see how he stacks up, especially because he should be, kind of in that, I guess the mid to back end of the Heisman race, in my opinion, given what he's doing all over the field. So this could be a really big showcase for him. So I think at the end of the day, it'll be a really big game. I think it'll go down to the wire, but I do think Ohio State is just a little too loaded. I think they have a lot of talent, and I think they will come together and pull out the game. But again, any given Saturday, anything could happen.
So that's it for today's episode. Thank you guys for watching. Special shout out to Golden for coming on this week's episode. We'll be back with you guys next week with another episode. And for more football coverage, you can find us at psucollegian.com and follow us on socials.
See ya.